Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. The title of this episode is Return to Amphibia. I think you're going to find this one very interesting. I know I did. Before I get started, though, I just want to welcome three new patrons on Patreon that are supporting Astral Club. And those are Diana Wildgunny. I hope I did that right. Sorry, Diana. Diana Wildgunny, who is Gunny, is an astral master. I am Jacob Bertram, is an astral scout, and Anon is an astral scout as well. And these people will get their advanced videos commercial free on Tuesday rather than waiting to Saturday. And there's also a private Patreon email where we can talk back and forth and I can answer questions and you can offer comments and suggestions and that kind of good stuff. I will have a link in the description for anyone who is interested in joining Patreon and supporting Astral Club. Okay, let's get started. Now, I encourage anyone who hasn't seen my original video, which was Astral Journey to an Alien Civilization. Now, I made that and posted it almost 2 years ago now. It was back in August of 2019. So I encourage you to watch that if you haven't already, because it'll give you a lot of the background that I'm not going to go over again here, because it's all there. However, I will do a quick review of what happened in that particular video. So, like I said, this happened almost 2 years ago. I traveled to an alien planet in my astral body. It was lit by a binary star system, and I found that it was inhabited by humanoid amphibians. I progressed to a far enough future of theirs so that I could take physical form. When I descended to visit them, they had reached roughly an ancient Rome, ancient Egyptian level of civilization. Let's say Earth circa 2000 of our years ago in technology. Now, there, I was greeted by a slightly shocked but a very pleasant and welcoming people who had definitely amphibian ancestors. An important woman of the town took me into her home to meet her children. The following day, I was taken to a very important festival. It was called the Return of the Waters. The area of the planet was very dry during most of the year, but just like our ancient Egyptians, they depended on an enormous flood of water that came from melting ice and snow in their distant mountain ranges that would keep their society going throughout the year. Now, this festival was held in an enormous amphitheater fed by large and well engineered aqueducts that channeled the floodwaters into a giant pool. I witnessed many games of athletic prowess and bravery against wild beasts, celebrating their heritage and traditions. And I left just as the games were ending and the ritual orgy commenced. I was a married man after all. Okay, so that's that video I was just talking about that I posted, Astral Journey to an Alien Civilization. So I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out to bone up on what's going on. Okay, well, I left my body for an astral projection, but felt that familiar strong tide pulling me to a meeting with my angel. It had been a while since I had felt that pull, but, it was also very impossible not to go. Of course, though, I wanted to go. It had been a while. Now, when I regained consciousness, I was not just in the presence of my angel, but a whole council of 12 white clad humanoid figures. Now, they weren't all human, and I'm not going to get into a description. The main thing is They were of humanoid origin, or at least they appeared that way to me. Believe me, I know appearances can be deceiving. I do it myself. Now, they were seated in a classic elevated position. They probably pulled some of this stuff from my own mind or from Earth's mythology. So I had to incline my head upwards to address them. My angel stood off to the side, silent. I waited expectantly. Now, let me just remind everyone that the conversation that occurred between myself and these counselors was telepathic. And when I arrive at planet Amphibia, it was also telepathic in nature. After all, this isn't Star Trek, and everybody doesn't speak English. Anyway, the head counselor, he was the guy who seemed to be in charge, said, "What is your opinion of human sacrifice?" I said, "Okay, I wasn't expecting that question. I'm against it." He then said that the council has received requests from that planet you call Amphibia to help end the practice of intelligent being sacrifices there. Young children are staked to the ground in the path of the return of the waters. If the sacrifice to the gods is sufficient, they believe the waters will be plentiful and the people will have a productive and joyous year. Wow, I said, that's messed up. I didn't know that. But why tell me? You must have amphibian guides who can address this issue. Well, the counselor said they all refuse to help. They either fear their gods or they fear destabilizing their society. Tradition is a large part of their civilization. I looked over at my angel. At my gaze, he lowered his eyes and remained silent. "So you want me, an alien, to go there and convince them to change their religious customs and possibly screw up their society?" Counselor said, "In a word, yes." I said, "Well, in a word, no, I won't do it. It's not my business to interfere in their planetary development. Get someone else." You're the only one left," the counselor said. "The memory of your last visit is still among them. They will respect you as an honored guest and be grateful for your return." I said, "Sure. That's because the last time I visited, I didn't try to change their civilization. Forget it. Now, if there's nothing further, I'm going back to bed." Then the counselor, perked up a little bit and said, "What about that little female child that befriended you and the family you stayed with? The one who took you by the hand and proudly showed you her room? I believe you privately named her Rose after your daughter on Earth." My annoyance was now turning to anger. "What about her?" I asked. "Well, she's been selected as one of the sacrifices for this year. She'll be dressed up in her finest clothing, led out onto the plain, and staked down into the hard-baked ground. They'll cut her in numerous places so she'll bleed out. Perhaps she'll die and be spared the violence of the surging floodwaters when they come." I was very angry now. "Damn you all!" I shouted. I had named the youngest daughter of my adopted family Rose after my own daughter because she was intelligent and sweet and she reminded me of my own child. It didn't hurt that I couldn't pronounce her real name, though, no matter how hard I tried. But she and her whole family had treated me like an honored relative, trusting a strange alien in their home. I remember thinking, how many of us would have been willing to do something like that? Think about it. But now I pictured this small child frightened and dying in some desert, surrounded by other suffering and bleeding sacrifices. After thinking about it, I said, "What do you want me to do?" I said at last, defeated. The next thing I knew, I had materialized above the green-blue planet that I named Amphibia. I looked for the location of the central city that I had previously visited. I quickly located the general area after a brief scan. The plain where the amphibian city was located was dry, with red, twin sun baked ground. The alien city was fed by an array of aqueducts that had only trickles of water visible now. In the far distance, there were snow-capped mountains, whose melting waters would enrich the city below shortly. From my elevated viewpoint, I could see enormous melt lakes that had nearly reached their capacity, constantly fed by rivers of melting mountainous runoff. This year should be a record return of the water ceremony, I thought. As I landed in the city town square, I was greeted by surprised and delighted people. Their croaks resounded throughout the immediate area. I couldn't hear them, but I could sense the vibration of their greeting. Now, after accepting their greetings and blessings, I told them that I had returned to celebrate the return of the waters with them again. I felt guilty at my forced lie, but I had to tell them something to explain my sudden reappearance after so long. And I couldn't just tell them the truth. With a group of children following me in a joyous throng, I made my way to the house of my previous host. The home hadn't changed. The adobe-like structure was in appearance like a series of igloos fastened together by passageways, connecting the side rooms to the central living chamber. Now, I stood outside the sealed entrance, which kept the moisture away from the dry, water-wicking air of the outside. I sent a telepathic thought to the woman within that I had returned. She was surprised to see me, but quickly invited me inside. There was no symbolic cleansing swim as there had been last time in the family's common pool, and I couldn't miss the mood of melancholy in this formerly cheerful house. Most of our talk was at my last visit. When I brought up the coming sacrifice, my hostess put on a brave face and said it was the will of the gods and they had to honor their traditions. However, I couldn't miss the waves of sadness for the upcoming loss of her youngest child. Apparently, it was the tradition for the youngest of a chosen family to be offered as the sacrifice if the family's lot had been drawn at the temple. In ancient times, infant mortality had been very high, and it was thought that sacrificing the youngest was the wisest and least costly sacrifice to the community. Next, I asked if I could meet with the child that I had named after my daughter, Rose. She was in her precious room. When she saw me, she croaked with delight and rushed to greet me. As before, she guided me through her humble room by the hand. She said, "And this is my new picture that I made of our family pool. There I am, swimming the deepest." I noticed a new garment lying on her sleeping mat. "That's a pretty dress. Is it new?" She looked a little preoccupied, a little downcast. "That's my dress for the ceremony. It is very pretty, isn't it?" I cursed myself inwardly for inadvertently bringing up the topic. but I couldn't believe how brave this young one was being. Now the subject was out there, I thought I might as well probe a little gently. How do you feel about the ceremony? My friends say it's an honor to be selected as a sacrifice. I am a little scared, though. Do you think it will hurt very much? I tried to comfort her, but I really didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you say to a young child who is about to be murdered for their religion and traditions? I resolved that I had to do something, though, or at least try, for Rose's sake. After my short meeting with little Rose, I asked my hostess if she would take me to this temple of the gods. She was a little confused by my request, but she readily complied. I privately hoped that these priests were reasonable men and not fanatics. But I needed to talk with them to find out more about their gods, religion, and the selection process before I could discover if there was anything I could do to save Rose without major interference in the amphibian society. The temple didn't look like the Sistine Chapel as I half expected, more like a scaled up version of the home of my host family. It was constructed of the same red baked earth as every other building here in the city, but it had been coated in some sort of enamel, which caused the glow of the two suns to radiate outwards in a brilliant and blinding sunburst. Before entering, I had to pour a ceremonial glass of water into the pool at the entrance. There was a handy bird bath next to the door for that purpose. Inside, I found a central hall lined with amphibian statues of their gods and goddesses. I was greeted by a priestess. So much for my earthly male priest prejudices. I introduced myself, but she already knew all about me. I politely asked her to tell me about her religion and her gods. She took me through their pantheon of 9 gods, each responsible for a different facet of life. However, the one thing they all had in common was the absence of eyes. I said, "Thank you for the tour. It was wonderful and enlightening. But may I ask you why all your gods appear to be blind?" She said, "In ancient times, our people abandoned those born without eyes on the dry shore to perish. They didn't want them to be a burden to their grouping and to their tribes. It was the custom back then. Now, today," she said, "of course, we take care of those born without eyes. But back then, it was the custom, to abandon them on the shore." She intuitively, I guess, guessed my next question. She said the old gods saw these blind outcasts on the shore one day and took pity on them. They made them into the new gods before they themselves departed for the outer dark, never to be seen or heard from again. So I started thinking about this, and I asked, so how do the blind gods know that you're sacrificing to them if they can't see? The priestess says, "It is true, they cannot see those sacrificed, but they can touch them and smell their blood." A germ of an idea started running through my devious mind. But first, I needed to test this woman for fanaticism. I asked, "How do you feel about the sacrifices?" "Truthfully," she said, "I despise them. But how can we risk the well-being of the people by jeopardizing the return of the waters? I had hoped for a response like that from her. I have more questions about the sacrifice selection process. Can you show me how it works? Certainly, she said. She led me into an adjoining room where I could see a main fountain coming from the wall, emptying into a giant pool. Inside the pool were many flat stones, lightly colored, with various designs on them, some of them very intricate. The priestess told me that each stone had the signal crest of each family in the town. 9 stones for each god were picked each year by a blind amphibian to ensure fairness. I said, Priestess, you said that usually 9 stones are selected as the sacrifices for the 9 gods. Then why are there 10 stones lying dry here on this small table next to the fountain? She said it was very odd. After the 9 had been selected, one stone jumped from the pool and landed next to the others. We took it as a sign and included that family in this year's sacrifice. Let me guess, I said. The 10th stone had the crest of my host family, didn't it? Yes. How did you know? Lucky guess, I said. She appeared not to understand quite what my response was. I think luck might be more of an earth concept. At any rate, I then continued to ask her other questions about the ritual, and I tried to think how I could get Rose out of this situation, as well as the other sacrifices, while still appeasing their gods and bringing the abundant waters to the people, as was their belief and custom. I stood on top of the tallest tower that was constructed to announce the return of the waters and the beginning of the festival. 10 figures were staked to the ground in the distance. The 2 amphibians standing beside me, a woman and a child, didn't have the visual acuity that my astral body had, so they couldn't see what I could see, the blood-spattered garments each figure was wearing. The massive floodwaters that I had seen while I hovered in the high atmosphere had emptied as I expected, sending torrents of white-capped water into the aqueducts and onto the barren parched plain. The sacrifices were soon swallowed by the raging waters. The woman next to me, the priestess I had spoken to earlier, said, "The waters are abundant this year. We are grateful to you, Ik." By the way, they have no R in their language, so even when we're communicating back and forth, all they can approximate in their mind is essentially Ik. So that's what everybody called me. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that before. It didn't really bother me that much. I mean, heck, I've been called a lot worse. The child next to me was Rose. She said, "I miss my garment. It was very pretty." I looked down at her and said, "I'm sorry about that, little one. We'll see if we can get you another beautiful garment for next year. We needed your dress for the doll that took your place in the sacrifice, just as the others had to give up their favorite clothing as well. Now, does your wound still hurt? I'm sorry we had to cut you, but we needed your blood to be on the dress so your gods could smell it." She says, "It hurts just a little. I'm getting big now, and I heal fast like an elder." As the amphibians grew older, their healing processes improved until they reached advanced age, and then they declined. anyway, I smiled at that. And I was happy. We had found a way to replace the live sacrifices with a symbolic one. I had accomplished my task without undue disruption to the amphibian religion and civilization. Rose asked me, "Will you come back for next year's festival?" I said, "Who knows? Perhaps I will. Keep up your artwork. I want to see it upon my return." Rose's face was their version of smiling as she faded away and I lost consciousness, only to reappear and regain consciousness back in the council room. The same counselors were there, although I noticed my angel was not present. "You have done well," said the lead counselor. "Congratulations." "Screw you all, sideways. You set me up. Admit it." The counselor said, "I fear I have no idea what you're speaking of." "Don't even give me that crap. It was you who made that 10th stone jump out of the sacrificial pond, wasn't it?" After a brief pause and the council kind of looking around, being a little disturbed, he said, "Yes, it was. Your angel guide told us you wouldn't cooperate without a personal stake in the situation. He tried to convince us not to manipulate you in this way, but he was overruled." "I thought so. Well, I've got an important decision to make now, and I'm going to take my time and carefully consider my position in Astral Guide School. In the meantime, don't contact me again. If I need to talk to you, I'll contact you. Goodbye." That was the end of this extremely interesting experience. It was a bit emotional for me at times, as you might expect. Um, I'm glad I was able to help get rid of that human or amphibian sacrifice that they did without harming or disrupting unduly their religion and civilization. But I don't like being manipulated. I don't like being used that way. What I'd like is some advice. Do you think I should resign from Astral Guide School and just go my own way? If you do, say yes. Maybe tell me why. If you think I should stick with Astral Guide School because maybe I'm doing more good than harm, even though I'm being manipulated sometimes, then put no and tell me, maybe why you think I should stay with Astral Guide School. And I'll read through all your comments and it'll be a part of my decision. In the meantime, I hope you found that extremely amazing experience of interest to you. If you liked it, hit the like button, share it with those of like minds, subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as I said, please leave questions and comments and let me know, yes, I should quit, or no, I shouldn't quit Astral Guide School. And as always, I'm Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.